I'm Doug Farrer, and this is The World Unpacked.
Jonathan, there has been a lot of focus on domestic politics, but foreign policy has taken a lot of attention as well. The new tensions with Russia as they relate to Ukraine. In China, the president recently announcing that diplomatic boycott, that no diplomats from the U.S. will be going to the Beijing Winter Games. Athletes will be allowed to go. So how does he juggle those foreign policy challenges against the domestic ones as well?
Next week marks President Biden's first year in office, and what a year it was for American foreign policy. Among the many stories from 2021 was the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, the AUKUS submarine deal, aggressive Chinese activity in the South China Sea, and the Global Summit for Democracies. But what will 2022 bring? Joining me for the first World Unpacked of the new year is Alex Ward, a reporter for Politico and the anchor of the National Security Daily newsletter. We'll unpack the thorniest foreign policy issues that Biden will face this year, plus we'll hand out some grades for how he did on the foreign policy challenges he faced in his first year in office. Here we go. Alex, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So before we jump in, I have to say, everyone who's listening, if you're not subscribing to National Security Daily, you need to go do it. It's on Politico's website. It's the best reporting on national security every day. I only wish it came to my inbox a little earlier because by 4 p.m., I'm already looking after my children, so I have to read it after they go to bed. But congratulations on a great newsletter.
Thanks. No, it's incredibly kind of you. Our team works really hard on it when we try to put out the best thing we can towards the end of the day. So, you know, even when you're putting your kids to bed or right after, you at least can be caught up if you've been just head down in meetings. So thanks for the nice words.
Maybe I'll start reading that to them instead of a bedtime story. That'll be pretty terrifying, I expect.
I mean, I'm sure for little kids, it's like really good put to sleep fodder.
All right, so let's get into it. Let's start with kind of what's really happening at the moment, which is the Ukrainian-Russian crisis. Today, Wendy Sherman, as we're recording, has met with her counterpart in Russia for something like 8 hours, and it seems like maybe there's an opening for diplomacy and a come down from war. But I just wanted to get your take. You talk to people in government a lot, your sources. How is the Biden administration feeling about this issue, and how concerned are they about war in Ukraine?
Look, I got to be honest. I mean, I don't think today actually did anything. Like, and in the sense of we're at where we were sort of when the talks started happening, because both sides are still very far apart on the key issue, which is, you know, Russia wants Ukraine and Georgia to never be a part of NATO and to have like a written concrete, waterproof, ironclad guarantee. And the U.S. plus NATO allies are like, no, we're never going to do that because the open door policy is the bedrock of the alliance outside of Article 5, of course. So there might be some stuff that happens underneath that, right? Maybe some missile agreements, a revival of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, which it would not be nothing, right? That would be a pretty big deal. You might also get some discussions or some reductions in the kinds of exercises that Russia and the U.S. conduct. But in terms of sort of the big thing we're all worried about, will Russia invade Ukraine with the roughly 100,000 troops on its border? We are no closer to knowing that.
So part of the issue here, I want to bring it back to sort of Congress for a second, is, you know, Ukraine, we've got the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which Senator Ted Cruz has used to block basically every one of Biden's foreign policy nominees. And I know they've got a deal to vote on a sanctions bill. Can you tell me a little bit about how Ukraine, Russia, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline all fit together and have hampered President Biden's foreign policy so far?
Yeah, so the Biden administration made a trade effectively with the Germans, in which they said, okay, you know, the Germans really want this Nord Stream 2 pipeline to be done. And it was, of course, from Russia to Germany. So they said, all right, we will stop sanctioning the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, thereby allowing it to basically be complete. And it was nearly complete anyway. And, you know, then Ukraine, but and that's bad for Ukraine. At least the Ukrainians would say that. And a lot of people in Congress would say that because, you know, that was sort of the one thing the Ukrainians had, that it was energy, Russian energy going through there. Now that it's sort of, you know, no longer as needed, then, you know, Ukraine loses money. People think, you know, Russia doesn't need Ukraine as much, et cetera, et cetera. So what Congress is a little bit worried about, and this is mostly Republicans like Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, although a lot of Democrats feel this way as well, Jeanne Shaheen probably first among, is that, look, we're somewhat selling our Ukrainians up the river here, our Ukrainian friends. And on top of that, we're allowing Russia to clench its fist further around Europe's neck by having this pipeline into the heart of Germany, which, arguably the most important nation in the EU, if not the second. So since Cruz and Hawley and Rubio and others have put these blocked tons of nominees because of this, basically saying to Biden, you need to reimpose those sanctions in order to get these nominees through. And that hasn't happened yet. We haven't had a reversal of the policy. Now, what we are seeing is a somewhat of a deal in which Cruz will have his bill voted on, which, if it were to pass, and there's a chance that it passes, I think a small one, but still a chance, then basically those sanctions could get reimposed if Biden signed them into law. And then, but even just getting a vote, he'll allow some of those blocks he'll lift a lot of those blocks. And then if it moves to the House and the House takes it up, which is not a done deal, he'll release even more of those holds.
So let's shift to something where there is a little bit more bipartisanship, at least. And that's the sort of general agreement that the Chinese are a threat for a variety of reasons, that the United States needs to have a strategy for China that considers them more of an adversary and deals with them accordingly. So would you say that this will continue to be the top priority for the Biden administration for the year of 2022?
Yeah, I mean, China is the be-all, end-all. And like whoever the next president is, whether in 3-ish years or, beyond that, it's going to be China, and it's going to be China for a long time. Barring some sort of like world-defining change thing or, China collapses somehow, this is going to be it. It's the defining relationship. And I think it's beyond a talking point. I mean, it has turned into one, but it is the defining relationship because it covers so many things like technology, ideology, global politics, spheres of influence, economics, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's just, and security, of course, like all over the place. It's just China is everywhere. Expect more China stuff. It's amazing that we've sort of locked ourselves in quite quickly in the span of 2 administrations to a very hawkish China strategy, albeit this one a lot more multilateral than the Trump one.
I know there's bipartisan agreement in that it's more than a talking point that the Biden administration wants to confront China in a smart way. But there hasn't been a ton of action legislatively. I know that there has been a bill that they've looked at, but I don't believe they've passed it yet. And obviously, President Biden's taken a few actions here and there around sort of technology and sort of AUKUS, and we could talk about that. But, would you say that it's important this year that the president really put a larger plan into action in order to sort of back up this interest in taking on China? And if so, what would you think will come out either of the Senate, the House, or of the administration?
I don't think anyone doubts the administration's seriousness on China, whether or not these bills or some version of the bill passes. I think everyone understands the complexities of our Senate at the moment and of our congressional calendar and makeup, and, can't even get certain domestic priorities through. So, how are we going to get this sort of mega China bill as well? I mean, taking a step back, like everything that they're proposing, domestic to international, is just so big. It's just going to cause friction somewhere. And so I wouldn't be surprised if like this, these China bills get chopped up into little pieces and pass at NDAAs and other kinds of things. We're already seeing that with the last NDAA. So I think a lot of these measures will pass. If I'm in Beijing, I do care about the bills that are going through, but at the end of the day, I care more about how focused are they on us. And I don't think that attention is diverting anytime soon, despite all the distractions of the Russias and Ukraines and Ethiopias and COVID. That's not a distraction, but like it's a big thing you got to think about.
One shifting issue within the U.S. China debate is over Taiwan. Obviously, the United States has a one China policy, but it sort of seems like a lot of administration officials say one China policy, and then it comes out that we've been training soldiers there or that we are taking actions that appear to be violating the principles of the one China policy. So I would be curious in your conversations with folks at the National Security Council, Pentagon, State, I mean, how focused are they on the Taiwan issue and how concerned are they about a change in the situation there?
It differs. I mean, you've heard some military leaders, including the former Indo-PACOM commander, Admiral Davidson, say that, China is going to basically forcibly take over Taiwan within 6 to 7 years. That is just not the timeline the Biden administration is working on at the moment. When I've talked to more civilian officials at the Pentagon. They said, look, it's of course of concern, and we were all concerned about it for a hot minute there last year, but it's just not something they see for the moment because of all the problems that China's having internally. It would just lose any sort of credit that they've been trying to build. So that's really not on the docket at the moment, but I think they're very worried about what it could be down the line, and whether it's in a Biden administration or future administration. I think they're trying to set the parameters where Taiwan can really defend itself, where the U.S. does show its commitment to Taiwan, that it keeps deterring China from doing that. Look, it'll just be a focus. I think it will be somewhat backburnered, but who knows? After this Russia-Ukraine thing passes in one way or another, that could again once be the sort of thing we're all worried about.
One thing that keeps coming back but is seemingly stuck is the negotiations over the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iran deal. Officials keep going back to Vienna. The United States is not even talking to Iran directly. It's all sort of a big game of telephone, as a colleague of mine, George Perkovich, said in a piece we released last week. Do you view this as one of the big preeminent challenges for this year, or is this just sort of stuck in neutral for infinity?
If you asked me about a few weeks ago, I would have said stuck in neutral until infinity, if not in reverse. But it looks like there's a slight breakthrough, maybe. I don't know if it's rhetoric or not, but you are seeing, Iranian side say, look, we're moving towards some sort of deal here. Maybe we're reaching the final stages. You're seeing even some Israeli officials tell Axios' Barak Ravid that it looks like they expect a deal. The Americans privately have sounded a little more confident, even somewhat publicly. The Europeans as well. So I don't know what the contours of the discussions are. I mean, that's all really well held. And I do a newsletter about the world, so it's hard to get into the nitty gritty on everything. But what I'm hearing more generally now is that we have more positive signs now than we did just even a few weeks ago.
Some of the issues that have flared up in 2021 seem a little bit dormant now, and one of them in particular is Afghanistan. Obviously, for 4 or 5 weeks there, the whole world was focused on the rapid withdrawal, the sort of disaster of trying to get people out of the airport, the deaths of those Marines on the territory at the edge of the airport. It's totally gone out of the headlines, understandably. The Taliban's taken over, and we're here in this situation. So, do you think this is kind of a dormant issue now, or do you think that this will rear its head in 2022?
Look, I indict my own industry, and myself included, for leaving Afghanistan off the headlines. It's a shame because it was the only thing we could talk about for a while, and showing, the Biden administration's foreign policy bad or whatever was the sort of main narrative. That's one. But two, of course, it's sort of a big thing that was happening. So, of course, we focused on it. But, look, there are millions and millions of people that are going to go hungry and freeze to death and just suffer because of the way we left and the sanctions we have on the Taliban. The exit was never going to be pretty. I just want to be very clear about that. There was always going to be a lot of suffering. But the fact that you have a country that has collapsed in, this quickly, that has so many struggling, the fact that we've sort of given up on the story, to me is bad. And look, again, I gave up on it too, in a sense, because I've got so many other things to talk about and write about, and I'm supposed to be doing what's happening in Washington right now. And that's the thing, is there's just not much happening in terms of Afghanistan anymore. We're not caring as much because the Taliban are in charge. We're not really changing as much as some argue we should, the treasury licenses and all that. So it's, an American action in part is triggering a massive humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. I think Taliban take full blame here. Let's be clear. But the Americans have and NATO and all that have a responsibility here too. And we've just it pops up once in a while, but isn't a major story. And it should be.
When we come back, I'll ask Alex about how this year's midterm elections could shape Biden's foreign policy, and we'll do a quick report card on key issues from Biden's first year in office. Hey, thanks for listening to The World Unpacked. If you're enjoying the show, leave us a rating and be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
President Biden will enter his second year in office after the new year, but he faces a big test. Can he and Democrats hold on to their power? The 2022 midterm elections are expected.
So the first Politico playbook I'm a big fan, newsletter of the year on January 1 talked a little bit about how this is it. This is the midterm year, which obviously gave me a crippling sense of anxiety. So obviously that's true. We are heading into the midterms now. Things don't look great for Democrats. I don't think that's a secret. So I'm curious what impact you think political dynamics in the United States will have on Biden's foreign policy decision-making.
This is always a tough one. I mean, Congress has given up a lot of foreign policy power to a president. It's going to be really hard for any Congress to rein in a president unless they actually pass a whole bunch of legislation to do so, which I know there are some on offer, but aren't really being taken up. What I would guess, though, and again, there's a lot of time between now and the midterms, and who knows what actually happens. But say it goes as the conventional wisdom says, Democrats get shellacked in the Senate and in the House, especially the House. All of a sudden, you have Republicans in charge. I think Biden's Russia policy is probably going to have to change because we're already seeing with the Nord Stream 2 stuff. We're seeing them not, want to send more weaponry. Republicans want to send more weaponry to Ukraine. If there are actions that Biden took or wanted to take that might be to the left of Republicans, they can kind of slap back and say no, and pass stuff. And frankly, on the Ukraine issue, there are a lot of Democrats that are in line with Republicans. You can imagine maybe more hawkishness on China, maybe after 2-ish years of the Biden way of trying to figure it out with allies, regardless of gains, it might have to shift to a bit more stick than carrot. And I would guess that even though we haven't had the midterms happen yet, you are going to see a nuclear posture review and a bunch of national defense strategies and strategy documents coming out that are going to aim to lock in the Biden approach now before there's sort of a congressional push against those. And that will be at least sort of a bedrock set of documents that Biden team can look back and go, but we wrote this. This is how we think about things. You and Congress going to have to meet us in the middle on this instead of us moving all the way towards you guys. So I'm going to guess they're going to try to move the Overton window a little bit here, but who knows?
So what about going the other way? I mean, is there any foreign policy issue looming out there or a one from 2021 that you think will have a substantial impact on voters in the midterms? Or is this just basically all about COVID and supply chain and inflation and domestic issues?
Yeah, I mean, look, foreign policy never ranks high unless it's like post 9/11 and terrorism, which frankly, the appeal of a foreign affairs and national security reporter to a public that is definitely not only national security experts listening is look, like the president has the most autonomy on foreign policy and doing stuff in the world. Frankly, I think we should vote on a president based on their foreign policy views more than how they handle the economy because they don't have as much control over the economy or other domestic things as much as we'd like them to. They just become punching bags on that. But actually how America deals in the world is almost entirely dependent on the president and the foreign policy team he or she puts around them. So my appeal to voters, please vote for a president based on foreign policy. But besides that, I just don't see real salience. Look, if Russia were to take over Ukraine, I feel like that could be a big thing. China wants to take over Taiwan, that'd be a big thing. They'll probably be seen as failures for Biden, or they'll be painted as such. If there's a terrorist attack, that'll probably matter on home soil. If I don't know, some economic catastrophe that is because of some decision, I don't know. I'm not. You can prognosticate all day, but it usually has to be some sort of disaster.
So, Alex, I want to do sort of a report card for the Biden presidency in terms of foreign policy from his first year in office. You can give 1 through 10, you can give an A through F. You're in charge, and I just want to go through a couple issues and we'll talk about it briefly. And I want to start with Russia because it's back in the news now, and it was such a huge and important part of the previous administration. How do you think Team Biden handled the many complex issues with Russia in their first year?
I mean, it's, jury's out because we're still waiting on this Ukraine bit. I would say a B, and just because, they got New START extended pretty quickly. They got Russia for the first time as part of a P5 statement to say nuclear war should never be fought and cannot be won. They are at least jaw-jawing instead of war-warring over Ukraine. It could be a lot worse. And frankly, Biden and Putin at least are having the lines of communication open. Biden's at least not fawning over him. So I think it's a pretty good play. Plus, I know a lot of European allies are pretty happy with how they're being consulted on Russia and various other issues. So I'd say a B, of course, but that could quickly, very quickly plunge into a failing grade. So I think, all things sort of to date, it's been pretty good with the, impending catastrophe that could occur in Ukraine. That said, this is high risk, high reward. If this diplomacy works out, and sort of what we're hearing is if Russia sort of backs down for a guarantee that the U.S. isn't going to put missiles in Ukraine that it was never going to, and there's basically just a reduction in tensions, because of military exercises. Many of those tensions are caused by Russia's grandiose new exercises. Then, that seems like an A, honestly. I'm sure it would not feel like an A in Ukraine, but from the sort of grander U.S. interest perspective, pretty good.
All right. What about Iran? Ongoing negotiations, good, bad, incomplete?
C minus, maybe. I mean, you have not, done the JCPOA. Granted, this team has been pretty clear that it would take a long time, but haven't really solved the Iranian-backed militia thing. They are still shooting at American troops in the region, which brings up the question why they're still there. That's another debate, probably, and what interest they serve in Syria and Iraq. But you haven't done a diplomatic deal. They've moved kind of close towards a nuclear weapon. Not that they are close, just closer, and no, sprint towards a bomb. But they got pretty close, or they are relatively close, let's say. Diplomatic deal still not hammered out after a year, and attacks on American troops in the region with no signs of slowing down. Not the best.
All right. What about democracy and human rights? I'm going to lump those together. What are your thoughts on that as far as a grade?
I'm not sold on this one yet. And I don't know if I have a grade because it's so nebulous. But I think, I think we can say clearly that administration that said that they were going to put democracy and human rights at the center of its foreign policy has not done so. If so, there would be a massive commitment to Afghanistan. If so, we'd be spending a lot more time and effort in Ethiopia. If so, we'd be trying to, allow way more refugees in than we are, or at least, the media wouldn't have to shame the administration into lifting the caps. It has been a very realist in the IR sense, I think, administration with the usual tinges and fringes of, that liberal rhetoric, but they've been a very just what is in the core self-interest of the United States, and not really caring about, that's unfair. They do care about human rights. They are doing some things about it, but it is not central to their foreign policy. And for that, I think that you can't give them as high a mark as I think they would want anyone to give them.
All right. What about climate?
Oh, boy. C maybe for climate. Look, they did okay in Glasgow. Commitments seemed fine. But with this, if you're talking about this as an existential crisis, probably not as much as you'd wanted to get. And if you're going to, not bring over Republicans to your side on this issue in your year or two, you're probably going to backslide on it going ahead. I know I'm supposed to do it on the first year. Look, Paris, fine. That was low-hanging fruit. Glasgow, okay. But I don't see the world on a greater trajectory climate-wise because of Biden administration actions alone. All
right. What about China? Big topic, but how they doing?
I think this one's it's too early to call. I think whatever grade you get for attending class is the one you get.
You showed up. That's good. Biden showed up.
Yeah, you showed up. Yeah. I think it attended. It's too early. There's just so many issues. She and Biden are still talking. No great confrontation. Trade war is still continuing. At least they're addressing anti-Asian hate stuff. That's important. But I don't, and NDAA stuff is talking about China and they're working on technologies and that's important. They seem to be doing a lot more on the Huawei's and the ZTEs and all that. Okay, that's great. But they've basically followed the Trump playbook with the multilateral aspect. But what does that mean? Who knows? At this point, it feels like we're in the exact same place. China, bad, worried about them, but they're still there. They still have their needs. They're still pushing things through. We care more about the Uyghurs now. Okay, fine. but we're still going to the Olympics. So it's hard to judge. It's just so many things. I would just say they're attending. I think it's too early to call them.
Being president's so hard, and very rarely do they end up being popular after too long. I'm hunting for like something in the A range, and I'm going to take a stab at restoring America's reputation with its partners and alliances.
B plus. I'm also just loath to give an A on it. Although I said I would give an A if they solve this Russia thing in Ukraine. I mean, look, I've talked to a bunch of allies. They love the multilateralism, right? They love that. They love that they're being included more. But look, right now we're having this, Ukraine discussion. Ukraine's not really at the table, and neither are the Europeans. Let's be clear about that. I mean, yeah, there's the NATO and the OSCE stuff, but the Wendy Sherman-Ryabkov meeting was by far the meat and potatoes of this whole week, right? So they're embarrassingly not around. AUKUS pissed off the French quite a bit, we got to say. They're still not happy about it. Every time I talk to a French person, that comes up out of nowhere. Even if I'm like, hey, you want to go to lay dip later? And they'll go, AUKUS. All right, fine. And frankly, there were a lot of Eastern Europeans that felt that the Trump administration was tougher on Russia than Biden was. We don't see Poland trying to do Fort Biden. So I think it's still pretty much good. Like on the whole, very good, right? They've got a lot of collective action. They're doing more than just saying they want to work with allies. They are doing that. But is there sort of is America back? I guess is really the shortened version of your question. Almost, but not there yet. Not enough for an A grade.
Okay, you're tough. I appreciate that, though.
My mom's a teacher. She would like me to never give an A.
Okay, so that's fair. Yes, good. No grade inflation here in the ward.
No.
In the ward class. All right, let's zoom out a little bit for my last question. Your newsletter is a daily newsletter. You're writing super interesting, relevant, pieces with great quotes from people who are in the places where decisions are made. But so you tend to cover stories as they break, as anyone would. You did have one interesting piece in a newsletter recently, in the last one of 2021, where you kind of explored the idea that America had basically reached the limits of its power. This is it. We can't go any further, can't get any stronger. And I'm curious whether you can talk a little bit about that, what led you to that sort of story, and whether you think that's true as we head into 2022.
Well, look, I mean, the honest answer is I was looking for sort of a year-end wrap story. But I chose that topic because weirdly throughout the 6 months that I've been doing the newsletter in 2021, I kept sort of hearing America why can't we just do this? Like, okay, tell Putin to get out of here. Tell China to be better. Fix the immigrant. Like, why can't America wave its hand anymore and basically wish that, do things? And we can still do things. Let's be clear, but we can't sort of demand it or dictate it as we used to. And I think we're having a lot of growing pains with that realization. And I just kept hearing that all the time. But there is a sense, I guess my job at the newsletter is really to just, what is sort of the thing that's trickling, among the DC NatSec community and abroad. And that's just sort of the undercurrent at the moment. Has America reached its peak here in sort of its ability to dictate global affairs? Still has a lot of power, sure, but it can no longer wave its wand as we thought it could or wish it could. Whether or not you think that is silly or, wrong-headed, by the way, I might agree with you, but there's no denying that feeling exists, and that matters.
If you're not subscribed to National Security Daily, go right now on your computer, go to Politico and sign up. It's must read every day for me. And Alex, I'm so glad you found the time to come on the show and talk to us about what happened in 2021 and what we can look forward to in 2022.
Thanks for having me. Happy to come on. I feel like it's a yearly report card we got to do now.
All right, done. Hey, thanks so much for listening. We want to hear from you, so email us at podcasts@ceip.org. And you can find me on Twitter at Douglas L. Farrar. That's Farrar. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button and leave us a review or a rating. The World Unpacked is produced by the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Our audio engineer is Tim Martin, and our executive producers are Cliff Jayapranada and Clarissa Guerrero.
Kim Jong no fun over there.
Kim Jong. No.